The wind in Silver Creek carried stories like dust. It slipped through door cracks, swirled around booths, and whispered in every corner of town. And most of those whispers had one name inside them: Tom Walker. People called him half Apache when they thought he could not hear. They said it fast, like a curse, then pretended they were only talking about the weather. Tom lived where the town ended and the hard land began, up near the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. His ranch sat far from neighbors, far from comfort, far from anything that felt easy. A man could ride a whole day and still not see another roof. Tom was 35. His mother had been Apache. His father had been Mexican, gone before Tom could even remember his face. Tom grew up between worlds, and neither side fully claimed him. He learned the land the way a preacher learned scripture. He read clouds like warnings. He watched grass like it could speak. He could track a lost calf by a broken twig and a single hoof mark in hard dirt. The town had endless ideas about him. Some swore he hid gold in the caves on his land. Others said he guided travelers through dangerous territory and took payment that never got written down. But the thing that made people lean in closer was not cattle or gold. It was his wives. 3 of them. Mrs. Henderson announced in the general store like she was reading a list of crimes. 3 mail-order brides in 3 years. And not one lasted more than a week. Everyone knew the stories. Charlotte from Pennsylvania had taken one look at the empty scrubland and cried until her eyes swelled. She stayed in the cabin 4 days, then begged to be taken back to town. Margaret from Ohio tried harder. She even started a little garden, but a dust storm hit on her 6th day, and she packed like the devil himself was chasing her. Sarah from Boston lasted the longest, almost 8 days, and brought curtains, china, and even a piano. She talked about civilizing the place like the ranch was a sick child. Then she threw out Tom's mother's Apache blankets and cooking pots, calling them dirty and savage. Tom did not shout. He did not argue. He simply loaded her and her piano back onto the wagon with hands as steady as stone. After that, the marriage agency in St. Louis sent a short note with a sharp edge, suggesting he reconsider his circumstances before requesting another bride. Silver Creek laughed about that for weeks. But loneliness can make a man stubborn. Or desperate. Maybe both. So when Tom rode into town one autumn morning, people noticed. He moved slow and sure. His leather duster was worn but clean. His black hat sat low against the sun, and Mrs. Henderson, peeking through her window, saw that he'd shaved. Inside the post office, Jeremiah Hollis paused, with a stack of letters in his hands. "Morning, Tom," Jeremiah said. "Jeremiah." Tom's voice was low, with a hint of Spanish and something older. "Any mail for me?" Jeremiah glanced at one envelope set aside on the counter like it had been waiting. "That depends. You still writing to that agency in Chicago?" Tom's hand reached out, but Jeremiah pulled the letter back a little. "Tom, we've known each other since we were boys. Maybe it's time to accept some men are meant to live alone." Tom's eyes held steady, dark, and tired. "That's my business." The letter. Jeremiah sighed and gave it to him. From Kansas City this time, Missouri. Tom didn't open it there. He slid it into his coat and turned to leave. Jeremiah called after him, softer now. "Why do you keep doing this to yourself? And to them? Quote." Tom stopped at the door. For a second, it looked like he might walk out without a word. Then he spoke, quiet as a prayer. "You ever watch a wolf circle a campfire? It knows the fire might burn, but the cold and dark are certain death. Sometimes a man takes his chances with the burning." Then he was gone. The ride back to the ranch cut through harsh country. Red Rock canyons opened like mouths. Juniper and piñon clung to stones like they were refusing to let go. The mountains rose ahead, blue and sharp, their tops already dusted with early snow. Tom waited until the town was far behind him. Then he pulled the letter out and opened it in the saddle. The writing was careful, educated, and firm. "My name is Ruth Collins. I am 30 years old. I work as a matron, at St. Mary's Orphanage in Kansas City. I have read your letters. You write of isolation and silence as if they are things to fear. I have lived surrounded by noise and still found loneliness. I do not fear empty spaces or hard work. What I fear is a meaningless life. If you are still seeking a wife who will not flee at the first silence or hardship, I am willing to correspond further. Tom read it twice. Then again, no soft promises, no talk of fancy dreams, no lines about taming the West, just plain truth, like she was applying for real work, not a fairy tale. That night, by the light of a lamp, Tom wrote back. He told her about hard winters and harder summers, about the nearest neighbor being a day's ride away, about Apache trails still crossing his land, about the ranch hands who came and left with the seasons, about the work that never stopped. He almost wrote about Maria, his first wife, the real one, the Apache woman who had understood silence like it was a language, but the memory still cut too deep, so he left that wound unopened. Instead, he wrote one honest sentence that felt like laying his heart on the table. 3 women have come here as brides and left as strangers. Perhaps the fault is mine, but if you are willing to risk it, I offer you hard work, honest partnership, and a life that matters because it is real. When he sealed the letter, coyotes howled outside, their voices rolling through the canyon. Tom stepped onto his porch and looked up at the stars. Somewhere, Ruth Collins might be looking at those same stars, even if city smoke dimmed them. Tom let himself hold one thin piece of hope. Maybe this time would be different. Time passed. Then, 2 weeks before winter fully set its teeth into the land, a telegram arrived. Arriving November 15th. No need for fanfare. R.C. Tom stood at the Silver Creek Depot under a gray sky, waiting as dust rose on the road. The stagecoach came closer, wheels clacking, horses snorting. Passengers stepped down. A merchant. A rancher's wife. 2 cowboys. Then she appeared. She didn't wait for help. She gripped the doorframe and stepped down on her own, one worn satchel in one hand, one modest bag in the other. Her dress was plain and practical. Her hair was pulled back in a tight knot. Her eyes were brown, sharp and steady. Her gaze found Tom immediately. He removed his hat. Miss Collins. Mr. Walker. No smile, no fear, just calm measuring. You're taller than I expected, she said. Most folks say that. He reached for her bag. May I? This one stays with me, she said, lifting the satchel higher. Personal things. You can take the other. Tom nodded once. My wagon's there. We've got a long ride before dark. I expected as much, Ruth said. And she followed him without hesitation, while the whole town watched, like they were waiting for her to break. But Ruth Collins did not even glance back. The wagon rolled out of Silver Creek with the town's eyes burning on their backs. Tom could feel it, even without turning around. Mrs. Henderson stood near her store like she belonged there, pretending she was only watching the road. Ruth saw her too. Tom noticed Ruth's shoulders rise just a little, not from fear, but like a woman straightening her spine. Ruth climbed into the wagon without help. She settled her skirt in a neat, quick motion. Tom climbed up and clicked his tongue to the horse. The wheels creaked, and the town faded behind them. For the first hour, Ruth said nothing. She watched the land like she was studying it. Tom had planned to talk, to explain the ranch, the distance, the storms, the silence. But Ruth did not give him the opening for speeches. Instead, she asked the kind of question no bride had ever asked him before. How long since the last rain? Tom glanced at her, surprised. 6 weeks, maybe 7. She nodded and pointed at the brittle grass beside the road. It shows. Tom felt something shift in his chest. That was a rancher's answer, not a lady's complaint. They climbed higher into rocky country. The road grew rough. The air grew colder. The wind cut through the wagon like a knife. Ruth pulled her shawl tighter, but she did not sigh or frown. Her eyes kept moving, always noticing. What's your water source? she asked. Spread Creek, Tom said. Runs year-round. I've got tanks for dry spells. Ruth nodded again, like she was checking off a list inside her head. And your nearest neighbor? The Sandoval family, Tom answered. Days ride east, good people. Ruth's eyes narrowed slightly, thoughtful. You trade with them? Quote. Tom hesitated. Sometimes. I helped them dig a well 2 summers back. They help with branding in spring. That's how it should be, Ruth said quietly. It wasn't praise, it was approval. When the canyon opened and the ranch finally came into view, the sun was touching the mountain peaks. The buildings looked small under the wide sky. The house was adobe and timber, solid but plain. The barn and corral stood strong. Everything looked like it was built to survive, not to impress. Ruth stared at it without blinking. It's smaller than I pictured, she said. Tom braced himself, waiting for the next words. The ones he had heard before. This is too far. This is too empty. This is too wild. But Ruth said something else. The placement is good, she continued. Protected from north wind. Clear sight lines. You've thought about defense. A man alone thinks about it, Tom said. A woman alone does too, Ruth replied. Tom swallowed. I'll show you inside. The house was clean, because Tom kept it that way, but it was bare. Plain furniture he had built himself. No curtains, no soft blankets on chairs, no touches that made a place feel warm. Just walls, a stove, a table, and space. Ruth walked through slowly. She opened cupboards, checked the stove, looked at the shelves. She did not act shocked. She did not act disappointed. She acted like a woman seeing a job that needed doing. The spare room is yours, Tom said. I'll bring your bag. Ruth turned and faced him fully. Her eyes held him like nails. Before that, she said, I need to know the real work, not what you think I want to hear. What needs doing here? Tom felt heat climb into his face. The polite answer would have been small talk, light housekeeping, a little garden. But Ruth's stare demanded truth. Everything, Tom admitted. The house is clean enough, but there's no system. I cook to eat. Garden's gone wild. Mending piles up. Preserving doesn't get done right. The root cellar's a mess. I built a chicken coop, but never got around to getting chickens. I spend my time on cattle and fences. The house just exists. Ruth nodded slowly, like she expected that. And you want it to be a home? She said. It wasn't a question. Tom found himself nodding. Ruth unpinned her traveling hat and set it on the table. Then show me the kitchen stores. For the next hour, Ruth worked like a woman counting rations in a storm. She checked flour sacks for bugs. She examined tins for rust. She asked how often he rode to town. What could be gathered wild? What could be traded with the Sandovals? Then she found something tucked into a corner. 2 heavy stones. Old. Worn smooth by years. Grinding stones, she said, touching them gently. My mother's, Tom said. Ruth looked at him. You know how to use them, quote. She taught me. For corn. The last woman called them savage, Tom said before he could stop himself. Ruth's eyes sharpened. The last woman was a fool. These will outlast any store mill. Tom stared at her, stunned by the calm force of her words. I'll need you to show me the proper way, Ruth added, so I don't ruin your mother's tools. Not your mother's savage tools, not your dirty Apache stones, just tools. Useful, respectable. Night fell fast. Tom lit the lamps. Ruth unpacked her few things, and the few things surprised him. No trunks, no boxes of fancy plates, no curtains. Just clothing, a sewing kit, and a leather satchel she kept close. Tom started a simple supper. Beans, salt pork. The last of the town bread. Ruth came out wearing a plain work dress, her hair still pinned tight. She studied the pot, then moved without asking permission. She found dried onions he had forgotten. She found a tin of tomatoes. She added both like it was the most natural thing in the world. By the time they sat to eat, the meal smelled richer. Better. They ate in silence, but it wasn't sharp silence. It wasn't the kind that made a person feel alone. It felt like quiet that could be shared. When they finished, Ruth washed dishes with steady hands. "I need to know your routine," she said. "When you rise, when you need meals, what tasks are urgent? I won't interfere with your work, but I need to plan mine around it." Tom felt strange hearing that word plan. No bride had ever spoken like that. "I'm up before dawn," he said. "Coffee first, breakfast after morning work, noon meal if I'm near the house, supper at dark." Ruth nodded. "And washing day?" "We'll set one." He blinked. "We?" Quote. She glanced at him, almost amused. "Mr. Walker, you've been living like a man in survival mode. That's understandable. But I didn't come here to survive. I came here to build." Tom's throat tightened. "Why?" Ruth set the last plate down and turned to face him. "Because I'm tired of being useless in my own life. I've cared for 30 children that weren't mine. I've worked under rules made by men who never lifted a hungry child in their arms. I want days that matter." Then she sat at the table, hands folded. "Now answer me honestly," she said. "Your other wives, what really drove them off?" Tom's stomach clenched. "The isolation," he said. "The storms, the coyotes, the—" "No," Ruth cut in gently but firm. "That's what they said. What was underneath it?" Quote. Tom stared at the table, his hands curled into fists. Ruth leaned forward. "Was it your Apache blood they feared? Your Mexican ways they despised? Or was it that you never asked them to be partners, only decorations in a hard world?" The words hit him like a slap because they were too close to true. "I tried to protect them," Tom said, voice rough. "And in doing that," Ruth said quietly, "you made them useless. A person can't stay where they feel like they don't belong." Tom looked up, his eyes burned. "I'm not here to be protected," Ruth said. "I'm here to work and build. If you want a decoration, put me back on the stage tomorrow. If you want a partner, then treat me as one." The fire popped in the hearth. Wind pressed against the walls. The space between them stretched. Tom breathed out slowly. "What do you need to know?" he asked. Ruth's face softened just a little. "Everything. Which fences fail most? What predators you deal with? How long supplies last in winter? Who you trust in town? What methods work here?" She paused, then asked the hardest question in a quieter voice. "And your first wife," Ruth said, "the real one. What happened to her?" Tom froze. "How did you know?" he whispered. Ruth's eyes didn't move. "Because the house doesn't get this kind of order by accident. Someone loved this place once, and you kept pieces of her, like the grinding stones." Tom's throat tightened. The name tasted like old grief. "Maria," he said. And then, for the first time in years, he told the story out loud. How they met when he was barely 20. How they were both caught between worlds. How she understood silence, not as loneliness, but as peace. How they built 5 good years out of hard land and harder work. How a fever came like a thief and took her and the unborn child, leaving him with an empty house and a wound that never closed. When he finished, the room was still. Ruth nodded slowly. "That explains it," she said. "What?" Tom asked. "Why the others failed," Ruth replied. "They tried to replace her or destroy her memory. They didn't respect what was already here." Ruth stood and headed toward her room. At the door, she stopped and looked back. "What time is your dawn coffee?" she asked. "An hour before sunup," Tom said. "I'll have it ready," Ruth said. Tom felt his chest tighten. "You don't have to." "Yes," Ruth said, calm and final. "I do. Partners means the work gets shared. The hard parts, too. No pretending." Tom swallowed. "Agreed," he said. Ruth disappeared into the spare room. Tom sat alone by the fading fire, listening to the wind and the distant coyotes. He had expected tears by night 1, complaints by day 2, a packed bag by day 6. Instead, he had a woman who asked about fences and water, who respected Apache tools, who spoke truth like it was a shovel in her hands. Outside, the sky turned darker. Winter was coming, and for the first time in 10 years, Tom Walker wondered if the house might not stay empty. But the real test was still ahead. Those first 7 days had broken every other bride. Day 7 was coming. Day 7 came with a low gray sky and a sharp bite in the air. Tom woke before dawn like always, but his body felt tight, like a rope pulled too hard. He did not want to count days, but he could not stop himself. 7. That was where the others cracked. 7 was where tears came, or anger, or packing, or silence that turned cruel. He stepped into the main room and found the lamp already lit. Ruth was awake. She stood at the stove with her sleeves rolled up, hair pinned neat, moving like she had lived there for years instead of a week. The smell of coffee filled the room. "You're up early," Tom said. "Coffee first," Ruth replied, handing him a cup without being asked. "I found your sourdough starter. It needed feeding, so I fed it." Tom held the cup with both hands, warming his fingers. He had forgotten about that starter. Maria had kept it alive, back when the house had breath in it. Tom had shoved it behind jars and tin cans and tried not to look at it. "You know sourdough," he said. "Any woman who's fed hungry people knows sourdough," Ruth said. "It stretches flour. Biscuits will be ready when you come back." Tom stared at her. She had not asked him what he wanted. She had learned it by watching him, like the land itself. Outside, the wind picked up, cold and dry. It carried the smell of snow. Ruth glanced toward the window. "Storm's coming. We should move the cattle lower today." Tom nodded. "I'll ride out after breakfast." "You'll take food," Ruth said, "and water. I'll pack it." He almost told her he could do it himself, but he stopped. He remembered her words. Partners. No pretending. He left at first light, riding hard to the far herd. The sky darkened by mid-morning. Wind shoved at the horse's side. Dust turned into sleet, and sleet turned into stinging snow. Tom worked fast, pushing the cattle toward the lee of the cliffs where they could shelter. His fingers went numb, his face burned, but his mind kept going back to the house. Would Ruth be afraid of the storm? Would she sit by the window like Charlotte, crying at the sky? Would she look at the blowing white and decide she would rather face town gossip than this wild place? Tom finally rode back. Night was falling, and the storm was already a wall around the ranch. Snow slammed the shutters. Wind howled like something angry. He pushed open the door and froze. The house looked alive, not decorated with fancy things, not softened with lace and china, but prepared. Lanterns glowed in the windows. The floor was swept clean. A pot bubbled on the stove, filling the room with the smell of meat and onions and warm bread. Ruth stood near the back door, securing a shutter with a strip of leather. Snow dusted her shoulders. "The chickens are in the barn," she said, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. "I brought in extra wood and extra water. The supplies are set where we can reach them easy." Tom blinked. "Chickens?" Ruth looked at him like he was slow. "We have chickens now." "We don't," Tom said. "We do," Ruth repeated. "I traded for them yesterday." Tom stared harder. "Traded with who?" "Mrs. Sandoval," Ruth said. "She came by while you were out. I sent word to her with a passing family. 6 good layers for that calico cloth Sarah left behind, and 2 jars of peaches you forgot in the root cellar." Tom let out a sound that was half laugh, half shock. Ruth's mouth twitched like she might smile. "Chickens produce eggs. Cloth sitting in a trunk produces nothing." The wind roared outside. Snow pressed against the windows like hands. Ruth handed him a towel. "You're soaked. Dry off. Supper's ready." They ate while the storm tried to tear the world apart. The meal was simple, but it tasted like hair. Tough beef made tender by slow heat. Beans with wild onions. Fresh biscuits. After supper, Ruth cleared the table, then sat across from him near the fire. "At the orphanage," she said, "storms scared the children. 30 frightened little souls in one building. I learned to turn storms into stories. It made them feel safe." Tom watched her hands as she picked up a sock and began mending it with small, neat stitches. Did you fear storms? He asked. Ruth's needle did not pause. I feared everything when I was young. Then I survived enough of it. Fear becomes something you manage, like hunger. Tom knew that kind of fear, the kind that lived inside a person like a bruise. Outside, the storm raged all night. Inside, the silence held steady. It was not empty, it was shared. On the fourth day, the storm broke. The world outside was buried in white, bright under the sun. Tom and Ruth dug paths, checked the barn, cleared the coop roof, and counted the cattle. Only one calf looked weak. Tom carried it to the barn, and Ruth followed, laying clean straw and rubbing the calf's legs until it shivered and breathed stronger. It needs watching, Tom said, every few hours. I'll take the night checks, Ruth said. Tom opened his mouth to argue, then shut it. Partners. That afternoon a rider appeared. Juan Sandoval, young and strong, pulled up near the corral with a grin and a curious look. Senor Walker, Juan said. My mother sends greetings. She asks if you survived the storm. We did, Tom said. Tell her thank you. Juan's eyes flicked to Ruth. Ruth met his stare without flinching. This is Miss Collins, Tom said, then felt the word miss taste wrong. He swallowed and said what was already true, in town eyes, in neighbor eyes, in the way the world worked. This is my wife, Ruth Walker. Ruth's face stayed calm, but her eyes cut to Tom like a quick blade. She did not correct him. She nodded once at Juan. Please tell your mother I look forward to meeting her properly, Ruth said, and thank her for the chickens. Juan's brows jumped. You traded for chickens already? Ruth's tone was dry. Eggs are useful. Juan laughed and rode off, still shaking his head. That night, Ruth sat at the table and spoke like she was setting a fence post. We should make it true, she said. Tom stared. What? The wife part, Ruth said. Legal, proper, paper and ceremony. Tom felt his heart beat harder. Is that what you want? What I want, Ruth said, is to not be a question mark. I want the right to be here if something happens to you. I want the town to stop thinking, I'm temporary. I want this place protected because I'm building it too. Tom watched her and he understood. Ruth did not ask for romance. She asked for strength in the law, for a place that could not be taken from her by gossip or cruelty. The priest comes through next month, Tom said. Father Miguel. He's fair. Then next month, Ruth replied, unless you need more time. Tom thought of the other brides, how they demanded comfort and control, how they wanted to change everything, even the bones of the house. Ruth had changed things too, but she changed them by working, not by throwing away what mattered. She respected his mother's stones. She spoke Maria's name without fear. She did not try to erase the past. She tried to build on top of it. No, Tom said. I don't need more time. The wedding was simple. Father Miguel arrived on a cold Saturday, dust on his boots and kindness in his tired eyes. The Sandovals came as witnesses, bringing food and warm laughter that filled the house like sunlight. Ruth wore Maria's blue dress, altered to fit her. The Apache stitching at the collar sat against her throat like a quiet promise. Tom's throat tightened when he saw her. He expected pain. He expected guilt. Instead, he felt something softer. Honor. Like Ruth was telling Maria, without words, I will not waste what you loved. Father Miguel spoke the vows in a steady voice. Tom answered without hesitation. Ruth answered with clear calm. I do, she said, like she was choosing a life, not just saying a line. Afterward, the Sandovals ate and laughed and made the house loud in the best way. Juan played a guitar while Maria Sandoval sang softly, and even Tom's stern face eased. When the guests finally left and the ranch fell quiet again, Ruth and Tom stood in the doorway and watched the last wagon roll away. Ruth let out a slow breath. Well, she said, we are married. Tom glanced at her. You sound like we just fixed a fence. Ruth's mouth lifted a little. Marriage is like a fence. If you don't build it right, everything escapes. Tom surprised himself by laughing. That night, the house felt different. Not because of the priest's words, not because of a ring, Because Ruth walked through the rooms like she belonged. Because she did. Weeks passed, and the town talk did not stop. It never would. But the ranch did not care about town talk. The ranch cared about water, feed, weather, and work. One day, a new neighbor tried to push them. A man named Josiah Briggs, fresh from Texas, demanded money when Tom's cattle wandered onto his land. He looked at Ruth like she was dirt and tried to speak around her. Tom's voice went cold. "My wife speaks for our ranch as much as I do." Ruth did not raise her voice. She did not tremble. She walked the damage, saw it was small, and offered a fair repair. Briggs agreed, but his eyes stayed hard. On the ride home, Tom watched Ruth. "That word he used," Tom said. "It didn't hurt you?" Ruth stared ahead. "It bothers me, not because I'm ashamed, because he tried to make you small through me, but he failed." Tom felt heat in his chest. "How do you stay so steady?" Ruth's answer came simple. "Because I know what I chose, and I know what we're building." Spring came again, and Ruth expanded the garden the Apache way. Corn, beans, squash. The three sisters. The ground turned rich under their hands. The chickens laid eggs. The root cellar filled. The house ran like a place meant to last. Then one night, after a long day of work, Ruth sat by the fire and went quiet in a way Tom had not seen before. Tom watched her face. "Ruth." She looked up, and for once her eyes held something that was not only strength, it was fear mixed with hope. "I think," she said carefully, "I might be with child." Tom's breath caught. He moved closer and placed his hand where she guided it, low on her belly. "Are you sure?" he whispered. "Not fully," Ruth said, "but I know my body. The signs are there." Tom sat very still, like if he moved too fast the moment would break. After a long silence, Ruth spoke again, softer now. "If it is true," she said, "then this child will belong to more than one world. They will have to be strong." Tom's hand stayed on her belly like a promise. "We will teach them," he said. "We will teach them to stand steady, to know who they are, to be proud of the whole truth." Ruth swallowed, and her voice came rough. "Partners," she said. Tom nodded once. "Partners." Outside, the wind moved through the canyon, no longer a lonely sound. Inside, the house held a new kind of silence, the kind that felt full. In Silver Creek, people would still whisper, they would still gossip, they would still bet. But Ruth Walker was not leaving. And Tom Walker, who had once believed he was meant to circle the fire forever, finally understood something simple. Some flames do not burn you. Some flames warm you. And once you find that kind of warmth, you refuse to let go.